Hi, I'm Gabe.
And I'm Kat.
And we're the Ghouls Next Door. And it's the spookiest time
of year.
Yes. I'm the ghost of Christmas. Wait, what time of year is it?
Of Halloween's past.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
What's this? I can't believe my eyes. Yeah.
You're having a whole time today.
Yeah, and you know why?
Why?
One, we're alone, so we can do whatever we want now. Because
this is our podcast. No, I loved our guests.
Yeah, our guests were amazing. We don't have any guests this month.
They said such smart words.
Yes. But now it's just us, listener, so you better like it.
And also, we're 2 years old.
Yeah, it is our 2-year anniversary during this spookiest time of the month. We've been here for 2 years.
We're living, man.
Yeah.
Maybe we're good at it by now. We hit 10,000 listens. So.
Yes. I think we're... So I think we are something.
We're famous, so...
Yeah. Listener, if you like us, please tell us that because we need it. And it's also our anniversary, so we just want a lot of love this month. And we're kicking off a new series, as we do, and specifically for the spookiest month, we are covering the greats. So we're talking about the horror writers who have influenced the genre. So last year we talked about Mary Shelley and H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Which was a good start. You were.
Yeah.
Right? And today we're talking about a gentleman who is kind of known as like the father or king of horror and does have a tendency to write about children in either a creepy sense or a fun sense. We're talking about Stephen King.
Yeah.
Get it? He's a king
of horror.
Steven.
What's up, my man?
So
we thought we didn't like you that much, and now we're like, whoa, you like lived. Yeah. All right. I got different feelings now.
Yes. I will say it's funny that this is happening now during our 2-year anniversary because our first episode was about it. Yeah. It was about clowns. I don't recommend anyone going back to listen to it. But
it was bad.
If you were to listen to it or you recall it in your distant trauma memories.
You know what? I don't think clowns is bad. I think the middle after clowns. In between that and like episode 13 was bad. Clowns was good because we learned that Timmies always die.
Yeah.
And we learned why clowns are scary. And I think we did a good job. So I disagree.
I think it was a fun thing, but it was a little weird and not structured. And it was fun. It was a lot of laughing.
And being
loud.
20 minutes of us just laughing maniacally.
Yeah.
Which that is not for everyone. It is what I love. But some people might not be about. In that
episode, we were not the biggest fans of Stephen King. There were some things that we didn't agree with. And just from like it's amateur
hard to agree with children orgies.
Yeah.
And
then still don't.
Still don't. But the rest is maybe kind of okay.
Yeah, and I mean, that was before we donned media analysis glasses as we do now.
That was our, early times.
Yeah, so we didn't really look at him the way that we are looking at media now. So I think it's a good, refreshing view into what Stephen King really is. So we're going to talk about him. Hopefully it'll be stuff you don't know, or at least you'll just hear our opinions and how we came around to not hating him anymore.
As we get older, we grow. We learn things. We're 2 years older, 2 years wiser.
Oh, boy.
Maybe 2 years from now, we'll hate him again. I don't know. We'll find out,
that's
man.
rough.
Life just keeps going on and on, and you just have to adjust.
Okay.
The brain is plastic. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about trauma, because, Stephen, oh my gosh, you've lived some.
Yeah.
That, like... Maybe in 2 years from now, we'll be like, oh, well, we tried. It's bad again. Or we'll be like, oh, no, he's doing better. He's doing good stuff. Or we just maybe understand it in a different way.
Maybe we meet him and he's cool.
Maybe he's cool. Maybe he's just a cool grandpa man. I don't know. We got to find out. But we learn and we grow. And now we're 2 years smarter.
Yeah.
Y'all.
So have a listen.
We tell you facts. All the facts. Hear facts. Still facts.
All right, so we're going to tell you a little bit about Steven. And let me tell you, man,
And Steven.
it's not that kind of Steven, but he is a Steven. My grandpa's name was Steven, fun fact, spelled the same
Ah.
way.
Well,
So I already
this
had a
is
natural affinity.
Stefan.
Yeah, no, it was spelled the same way. He was also Stefan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But yeah, he's lived an interesting life, which I
Yes.
was unaware of the first time. Which is, I mean, it's pretty much, he wrote a whole book about it.
Yes.
It was from his mouth. He was like, yo, when I was a kid, what was that? I don't know. Stuff happened. I was there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So it was really interesting because I guess I didn't really know all the stuff before I was doing this. Before we did our first episode, I didn't really have a frame of reference about what was happening.
Yeah.
And I just knew that I've seen all those things. Like, I saw all of his movies for some reason because I was an avid horror fan as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And I just learned a whole bunch. So I don't know if anyone's checked it out. On writing, not O writing. It's not an ode.
Oh, writing.
Yeah, that's not what it was.
How
On
I
writing.
dream of thee.
No, it's on writing. It's his memoir about his like writing
About
process
writing.
and how he's gotten to where he is and
Makes sense.
all that fun stuff. And after reading it, you know, I'm feeling a lot like, I see you, Steven.
No.
You've lived, man. I had no idea. I get why you wrote the way you did, and I get why it's a lot about kids and trauma and a little bit of neglect sprinkled in there. Yeah. So, Steven's life is one filled with unattended children, children getting hurt, lied to, or the opposite of being told way more, or the opposite, you know, not being lied to, being told way more than they should be told when asking questions. So you're asking, like, Mom, like, what is death? And she's like, I once saw a man jump from 3 stories and splatter onto the concrete. And I remember it was green. It was like something like that.
Cool,
like that is
Mom.
something his
Cool.
mom told him at like 6 years old. So I Steven, man, I see you. I saw Terminator at 5. It's not the same. But you see stuff that you're not emotionally yet equipped to deal with, and it changes you subconsciously to be very different in the way that you create things.
Yes.
Even if you don't realize that that's what it's about. So when you think of like the conflict in Pet Semetary where it's like, should you tell the kid that the death is happening?
Yep.
That's probably stemming from that. Or if you think It or Stand By Me, aka The Body, when the parents were nothing but unhelpful or not around, you'll see some parallels
Yeah.
with good old
Yeah,
mom.
parents really suck in all Stephen King worlds.
Yeah.
I can't think of any good parents.
Yeah. No, there's not. There's not any, I don't think.
No.
They're just, they're all just messing it up. So a little context for that.
Yeah.
This is all coming from his book. One of like the first paragraphs he's writing. I'm not saying we're the same person, Stephen and I, but
I have never seen you both in the same room before.
all I'm
in
saying
all
is
fairness.
we're obviously not the same person, but I like totally related to his youth story a lot. So in his book, he talks about how stunned he was after reading Mary Carr's memoir, The Liars Club, which I have not read, but I have heard of. And not by like how great it was or like how long it was, or like he said it was an amazing story. But the biggest thing that got him was how clearly she just remembers everything. That like everything she has documented is just like from start to finish, she remembers every single piece of what was happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone processes trauma differently. Sometimes you vividly remember that trauma and it haunts you for the rest of your life. And you just remember everything and wish you didn't.
Uh-huh.
What Stephen and I experience is an endless gap between time periods where you're like, why do I really just not enjoy going to the mall? And then like you subconsciously remember something horrible that happened to you at the mall, but you didn't know that that was a thing until like you were at a mall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's triggered by things. You're just like, whoa, I experienced. So yeah, he was kind of fascinated just by like the vividness of it. And he kind of describes his own experiences as like dark trees kind of grabbing at him and like forcing him to remember things, or just like the kind of the middle pieces are a blur. He doesn't remember the specifics, but he remembers like the big glaring events that kind of have shaped him to be who he is. And he gets to talk about some of those. And I always think of Pokemon when we're thinking of that, where you're walking around. You're like, la da 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 da. I'm just going to get my Pokemons. I'm going to go to the next town. It's going to be great. And then a trainer pops up and you're like, I did not stop at that Pokemon Center. I was not equipped to deal with this memory of a thing I had to deal with, aka Pokemon trainer. And it's like, I guess I have to, or I can channel it into winning some money, I guess, because I'm writing a book about it. I don't know. Yep, exactly. I don't know if that metaphor made sense to anybody, but here we go. If you think about that, he kind of talks about a lot of his childhood experiences and how it just really vastly influenced who he was as a person. So if we're thinking like fast facts, who is Stephen King?
Yes.
He grew up in Portland, Maine, or he was born in Portland, Maine, and moved around a lot. His father left, said he was going to get cigarettes, and then never came back.
I wonder if he actually said he was going to get cigarettes.
Thing.
I don't know if it was like...
I don't know if it was that, but like, you know, he just one day was like, all right, I'm going to go make a new family. And just strolled away.
Classic fathers.
Never came back. And back in that time, he was, I think, born in 1945 or something around that time. Divorce was not something you just commonly experienced.
Yeah.
It was still very, like, taboo. Like, you did not want to be existing in a divorced household. It really just, like, was a hard thing to deal with. It was one of, like, the most traumatizing things.
Work enough.
Yeah. So he describes like kind of being like shipped around. He says that his mom, he doesn't know this for a fact, but his mom farmed him off and his brother like to her one of the mom's sisters because like she just couldn't deal with these children.
Yeah.
Which happens.
It's better than putting them in a system of some sort. Facts. Keep it in the family.
Yeah, I mean, so it's, you know, he's moving around a lot. He's been to Indiana. He's been to Colorado. You know, he's not really staying in one spot for too long. And he had a lot of really fun stories. Apparently his first memory was dropping a cinder block filled with hornets on his toes at 2 years old because he was trying to be a strong man. And the first memory he has is this pain of the hornet stinging his ear.
Yeah.
And then the immediate following pain of the cinder block crushing all his toes. But yeah, he was just experiencing nothing but like really incompetent adults or just like adults who really just didn't understand that kids needed to be protected. So mom was working obviously because she's a single mom and she had to. So she had to hire a lot of babysitters. And he remembers one specifically feeding him 7 eggs and then him vomiting those 7 eggs up. The girl locking him in the closet for a very long time, at which point he threw up all over his mom's clothes. And fell asleep in his own vomit. And then that babysitter was fired because she was asleep on the couch while he was locked in the closet.
Yeah.
He also remembers his 6-year-old brother climbing on a roof, and they got evicted because of this. Climbing on a roof, and Steven watching from like the bathroom being like, I hope my brother doesn't die. Normal stuff. Really chill, you know? Really typical not watched kid stuff that influenced kind of a lot of his stories about non-watched kids getting severely injured or hurt or just like messed up because their parents are not around.
Yeah.
And it's like that tough mix between like you forgive them but also it's like, I'm kind of messed up now, Mom.
Yeah.
I don't remember why, but I know I am. And his mom was also very honest with him. So it kind of goes back to that like story I was telling about the mom talking vividly about the deaths that she had witnessed. Honestly to him as he was getting ready for bed. When he asked her about like what death was. And she basically told her about 2 experiences. One where a 14-year-old girl drowned and she could hear her screaming until she was dead. And then also about a sailor who jumped to his death. And she described the blood that came out of him as green. And it like really messed her up emotionally, I guess. She said the stuff came out of him was green. I have never forgotten it. And she said that to a 6-year-old child. 6-year-old child. And then as it, went on, a large part, whatever his childhood was, he was locked in closets. He was hearing horrific stories. He was also very sick as a child, so he had a lot of like really stressful interactions with doctors and doctors lying to him, telling him things weren't going to hurt, and then they did.
Yeah.
And just like not trusting adults. He apparently, I remember when we were watching that video of 101 Stephen King facts.
Mhm.
It was saying he witnessed someone get hit by a train
Yeah.
and doesn't remember it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of his
He
childhood.
almost died just as a adult person.
He got in
getting
a
hit by a
horrific car
car.
crash. And he actually said that the car crash was less painful than the doctor visits he had because they had to stick a needle into his ear.
Yeah.
And he said nothing was more painful than them draining his ear, even that horrific car crash compared, but not as long. Yeah. So he lived, man. That's all I got about Steven. And you can check out his website. He has a lot of like fast facts that are a little more, I guess, like what you would expect of Wikipedia or a little biography thing. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'd also say, because there's, you, when we were discussing this, talked about his mom having read his stories.
Oh, yeah. It was the cutest story in the world. So mom gave him, so she showed her stories and he like copied off of one. And she was like, this is really good. Did you do this? And he was like, well, I'm not going to lie. Like, I did copy a lot of it. And then she was like, the next one you write, don't copy it.
Yeah.
Make it yours. You could make it even better than theirs. And then he wrote this little story about like animals driving around to help kids.
Yeah.
And he gave it to his mom and she was like, this is so good. And she bought 4 copies of it. She gave him 4 quarters.
Nice.
And then sent each copy to
You know how
her
much
sisters.
bubblegum that is?
I know, but it was so cute. He sent it to each of his sisters.
That's so cute.
And it was like, that was his first sale.
Yeah.
He's like, I could be an author. My mom believes in me.
Aw.
She neglects me a bunch, but she believes.
She was busy.
She was busy. She was trying.
Single mom.
She was trying, man.
Yeah, I would say he's there's a shout out to his wife Tabitha as well. One, I found it very interesting that they were still together for so long, and that because I just feel like that's just a normal thing that you hear about.
Yeah, she actually wrote the biography on his website.
Nice.
It says like first written by Tabitha and edited by some other person.
Oh,
but,
that's
It's
cute.
cute that like she wrote it.
Well, I mean, she was like one of the first people to read his short stories in college, and had even like given him a typewriter and like essentially had him not take like higher paying jobs so that he would be then doing those jobs instead of writing. And it's kind of like specifically we're going to
That's
be
some
talking.
ride or die.
Yeah,
That's
right?
beautiful.
She like made these sacrifices and like worked harder, and it kind of reminds me, we're going to talk about Pet Semetary a bit, and also it. And in Pet Semetary, that wife feels very like that family feels very much like I got a glimpse into Steven's own family.
Yeah.
And in that, his wife in that is so much like that. Like she struggled in work so that he would become a doctor, and she like believes in him, and she's like sensitive and misunderstood and stuff. And even apparently she was the one who actually discovered the Carrie book, his first book.
Yeah, and really encouraged him, right?
Yeah, she like was like, no, you need to keep doing this.
And that's the one that did it.
Yeah,
That
that's
got him
the kickoff.
the
Yeah.
big name.
Yeah. And yeah, I would say he really puts his personal experiences into his work. And what I found in doing this research is that I apparently do like Stephen King.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Same. I didn't know either.
Well, apparently, like you said, I've watched a lot of his movies, but I've also read a lot of his pieces. I've read like The Stand and It and Pet Semetary now. I've read The Girl of Tom Gordon. We talk about that. And a bunch of short stories as well. Although not The Body. I would like to read The Body, which is what is Stand By Me is made of. Well, if you Google how many books has Stephen King written, the answer says at least 84.
Cool.
So even the
nice.
internet doesn't quite know, but it's got a rough estimation. But there are, what I think is one of the most prominent things about him as a writer is that a lot of his work has become staples of like television, like horror on TV.
Yeah.
Like they're not like, they haven't really been big screen things. Like they're always like made for TV miniseries. Like the first It was just a miniseries, right?
Yeah.
When I watched Rose Red, which was one of my most impactful films in regards to horror, it was just 2 VHS tapes that were like a miniseries that was made for TV.
Yeah.
And but he, like, you can't really, like, people don't even realize that they've watched or seen those things. Like, I'm like, oh, have you seen Shawshank? Have you seen
He's
The
just
Shining?
so strongly influenced so many facets of media that it's like, it makes sense that people call him the king of horror. Like, that he's, like, out there doing it.
Yeah.
He's been doing it, and people don't even realize how much he's been doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was Googling and trying to figure out some things. Like, I was like, okay, well, how many of his books have been made into movies? And there was no definitive answer. It was like, he's made at least 84. That's all I got for you. And then it helpfully suggested what other people ask instead of this question. And one of the questions is, how many Stephen King are there?
That's a good question.
So I don't have an answer, but I'm going to guess quite a bunch. And
There's
also
just-
one Stephen King, at least.
How many Stephen King are there?
Hey, Stephen King, how many?
How many are there in you? We're not talking multiverses either. We're just being like, hey, how many?
How many are there? What I find that's what has gotten me in regards to Stephen, and we're on a first name basis, I've decided, is that when I would just watch his films, like, or watch the films adapted to it, it's like an entire different experience than being a reader, which happens, right? The books are always better or different, right?
Yeah.
And what I find that you can't really put onto screen is the morals of his stories, right? And that they are just about how evil humanity can really be.
Yeah.
Right. And like
No,
how
that's true.
torturous and awful just like there are these evil things, like even Pennywise and It, right, is this evil thing. But even when it does evil things, it's really just feeding off of the evil that other people are doing. He just happens to be around when those things happen. But it's never really kind of like thought of that's why.
And
they're
it
doing
doesn't
that.
translate to screen as well as
No.
it should.
Yeah.
And that, like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense considering how much he's experienced that he would maybe have a pessimistic outlook on what humanity is.
Yeah. But I think what's also really great in regards to the film adaptations is that they are really fun stories. Like, they're wild stories. Like, think about Christine or Cujo. Like, those are wild. Like, Carrie is even like a crazy ride to be in, right?
Yeah.
And
It's really fun.
yeah, they're just kind of fun to adapt, right? And I read It, which is, you can tell it was a labor of love because that's a very long novel.
My brain
It was
doesn't
so
do reading,
long.
so.
But the book is better than the film, and for a lot of reasons.
Outside of the child orgy, but continue.
Yes, absolutely. That's just like goes without saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We can say.
Just want to make sure it was said, though.
Yeah, I would. So, like, with that, it's like you're gonna miss some really key things in the films, even the new ones, just by the nature of what films are, right? But there are some of the films that really stick out. So, like, Stand By Me, which is based on the body, is one of Stephen King's favorite adaptations of his. He loves The Shawshank Redemption, and
Because Morgan Freeman.
of course. Whereas The Shining is a film that he really didn't enjoy. And he has a really good reason for it. One, Kubrick took a lot of liberties with this work. Like we've discussed before, killing off the black character, who's like the magical black character, even though he doesn't die in the book, just to kind of show how bad Jack Torrance is, right? But there's a big part of it is that we don't see a growth or an arc in Jack, right? And the thing about Stephen King's novels is that they are very much about the people who are doing things and experiencing trauma and like dealing with their own demons. With the character that we see with Jack Nicholson, he's just always kind of unhinged, and we always kind of know that that's what he's going to be. And so we kind of lose like the abrupt twist of like someone just being unhinged and committing abuse. Like, it's hard for us to believe that family would have dealt with that for like as long as they did, when we don't see like the descent into that.
Yeah. It just like dehumanizes the characters more so than I guess reading allows because they're long books.
Yeah. Well, and I can't remember the exact quote, but I was reading like this like review from Stephen King about The Shining, and he definitely says like he admires Kubrick as an artist and thought it was a fun movie to watch and it was artistic. But he was like, the movie is just like this man in that it's all surface. Like there's no depth. There's nothing it's just all this like crazy colors and weird things happening in a house or a hotel with nothing underneath, which is completely robbing the story of what Stephen King is, right?
Yeah.
And so he just felt like it really did it. So in reading that, like his reaction to it, I have never ever been inclined to watch The Shining. It just seemed like the kind of movie I don't want to see. And I still don't want to see it. But I do really want to read the book now. Because now that I know that's not what it's about, I'm like, sign me up. I'm about to read that. And I'm going to read Dr. Sleep, and I'm going to get ready for Mike Flanagan. But the way he feels about that is the way that I feel about the way that Stanley is portrayed from the It series. You know what? I'll talk about it when we talk about It, because I really, really want to talk about Stanley. But I think the last kind of thing that I want to say is that, you know, he talks about some of the evil things in the world. He creates really fun and stressful and exciting environments, but he also has this tinge of like hope and inspiration in there, specifically in regards to children. So with this idea of like having all these different kids who have some semblance of the shining, right? The shine, right? And some connection and through their innocence and despite the abuse that they have, are able to like fight these things that are completely out of like their range of fighting. Like all of the kids in the Losers Club, you have Danny from The Shining, and even Ellie from Pet Semetary in the book has a bit of shine happening. And so like and Carrie, you know, like she was able to finally fight back against like her trauma and abuse as well. But it's always these kids who, through their innocence and defiance of the environments that they're growing up in, are able to fight back on these really like tormenting prehistoric like demented beings that otherwise no adult could really fight. Like the kids in Losers Club, when they were adults and came back in the book, they have to like essentially put themselves in the mindset of kids again in order to fight back. They couldn't do it as adults. And that's kind of like where I think his stories all have, you know, a thread, right? The same kind of like feelings. There's other things like The Stand, there's the Dark Tower series and things like that. But a lot of the ones that we really like are drawn to as a horror like community are those that are like kids fighting back.
Films. Yeah, films. We watch some films. Now let's talk about those films. And all that spooky stuff.
So we watch stuff.
As we do.
This one was tough because we, again, like we mentioned, we've watched a lot of his stuff. And so it was like, it was hard to be like, which one are we going to talk about? So I figured we could talk about two that had come out this year. One has been a really great year for horror. Which has been fun. And also a bad year for horror as well.
Yeah, it's a little mix of both.
And there's been a lot of remakes, right? So we had Child's Play, which is not Stephen King, but that came out and was a good job. But then we have Pet Semetary, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And then It Chapter 2, which is the second part of the It new remake that we had. So for people who are unfamiliar, It Chapter 2 came out this year. It's directed by Andy Muschietti, and it's about 27 years after their first encounter with the terrifying Pennywise. The Losers Club have grown up and moved away until a devastating phone call brings them back.
Yeah.
So we are seeing the Losers Club. They're back. They're adults. It is different already in that, like, we have an entire movie dedicated to the adults, where we had an entire movie dedicated to the kids, as opposed to kind of lumping them together in this mini-series. We had some famous faces, which I was not excited about, and still wasn't, like, when I left, I wasn't. The only one that did well was Bill Hader.
Bill Hader did a great job.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say he's a famous face. Like, people weren't.
I was so invested in his life. I was like, I need him to find happiness.
Yeah.
I was very invested in his character. And he was the funny character when he was a kid. He was the kid who always just said the rudest
Richie
stuff.
is one of my favorites.
Richie was a trip, and I loved him.
Yeah, and Finn Wolfhard did an amazing job as young
schooler.
Richie. Yeah, there's some differences with this in reference to, like, time period, right? So, like, the original book and the original miniseries take place in the 80s when they're kids. And then to like, and then they're like in the not like, I guess 90 something when they're
Sure.
adults. Whereas this one, they were, or no, they were in the 50s. That's what it was. And they were 80s when they were like, or something like that.
When they were adults.
Yeah. It was like 50s, 60s time because it was way more loose with like being patrolled and having an understanding of stranger danger
Yeah.
and trauma and all of that. And so then they were like in the 90s-ish time when they were adults.
Yeah.
So with this one, the kids were in the 80s
Yeah.
and now they're in today's time as adults, which is kind of different in a way to like explain how they're just leaving their bikes in the street. But in the 80s, we still had like latchkey kids who were still free to go and do things and end up on milk cartons.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of that. But yeah, Bill Hader did a really great job.
Yeah. I love
He was a standout character. I think James McAvoy has done better acting in literally anything else. I feel like, I don't know if it was the direction, what we were doing. But I feel like he really lost the excitement that is Bill Denbrough.
Yeah.
And like the leader quality, he just kind of felt like he was a little
He was
lost.
my least favorite. Bev was my least favorite, unfortunately.
Yes.
And then he was my second least favorite. I liked Eddie.
Yes.
Eddie's character, I thought he was great.
Yes.
He looked exactly like the child
And that's because they didn't pick
that,
just some pretty face that people know.
I think it was his dad. Like, it has to be the child's dad. He looks exactly like him. And then Bill Hader looked a lot like Richie. Like, even... He just did a good job, like, portraying that energy, I guess, even. It was just,
yeah, no, they definitely, he did have this, he had the same kind of like, I believe that Finn Wolfhard's Richie would grow up to be him, right?
Yeah.
I was upset when I heard that Jessica Chastain was playing Bev from the very beginning. When that came out and people were like, oh, good. I was like, one, it's like we have other ginger women in the world, like that could get this job and look more like the kid that was there before. Like, why aren't we giving other like actors an opportunity? That was like my one thing. It was like, I enjoy that. There's a trend in a lot of Stephen King's like movies where he uses actors who aren't super big.
Yeah.
And both the actors who are very well known did not do a good job.
Yeah, she just, it stinks because she just really didn't do a good service to Bev. Like, Bev was such a character in the first one.
That girl is so talented.
Yeah, the actress, the kid actress that
yeah.
played Bev. Yeah, she did an amazing job. And it just felt really, the child actress outshined the adult actress.
Yeah, and I
she
think
just really didn't do as good as she could have.
Yeah, and I think a part of it is that Jessica Chastain feels very strongly that, like, we don't need any more women abuse on screen, and I get that. But if that's the case, then we shouldn't be remaking a Stephen King novel. Because a part of, like, Bev's challenges is that, like, she came from an abusive home and she ended up in an abusive home, right? And that's, like, how that is. Like, the same thing with, like, Eddie came from like that abusive mom who's super needy, and then he ends up with a woman who actually, fun fact, is played by the same actor who played his mom, plays his wife in the new one,
which
because
is really funny.
really wanted to drive it home that it's cyclical, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's like a really important part, and that's kind of where Bev's strength comes from, that despite that, she like fights back and has like strength. And she is like, in the book, she's the one who's using the slingshot to fight him and is actually like doing the force behind like hurting him. Whereas in this, she was just kind of like weird, and
she did fight back, but it's just like, it wasn't her emotion. She didn't express enough of the emotions behind it. Like, I just didn't really relate to her. Like, I just didn't feel like that was the same character.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I just
she was like a
leaving
wisp of her.
Yeah, because it's like Bev in the first film was just such a strong presence. She had such a unique personality. And you just felt everything that she was feeling. Like, she was a really good job at like portraying the emotions that someone in that situation would feel.
Yeah.
And she did not do that in the second one. The second one, she was just very monotone, the same all the time.
Yeah.
She did fight back against her abusive husband,
yeah,
but like
very minimally, because she didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. And so we immediately left that situation, and then she was off doing something. And she was always just like a really minor tool And then, like, there was the love triangle that was unnecessary. And there's just a lot of things in there that I felt like I didn't care about because this wasn't my Bev. Like, when I was watching, I was like, who is this woman?
The emotionalness was not, like, I did not relate empathetically as much as I did from the first film. And it just wasn't good.
Yeah, there's another thing that people might be thinking about when they have viewed it is that the first scene that we have in It Chapter 2 is where a young man who is gay is assaulted and then thrown over a bridge. So again, spoilers, you know how this works.
I turned to Gabe and I was like, do we need to leave? And then she was like, wait, no. Just, it's a part of it.
Yeah.
There's a reason this exists.
And the thing is, so that scene is in the book. And I remember there's a lot of scenes in the book that are not in this film that could have been there to really flesh out that people are awful. And it's strange to me that they chose this one.
Yeah.
But it is based on and another reason why I've learned that I do enjoy Stephen King is that it's based on an actual like event that occurred where the character's named after the man who actually was assaulted, Adrian. And so King had heard about this because it was somewhere local, and he wrote this book and incorporated that scene almost verbatim to what was reported, because he was just like, this is about how awful people are, right? Like the book, I really, there's a show called Castle Rock, which is based off of his fictional town, where like the weird stuff happens, which is like fine. It's a fun show. It has Pennywise in it, the new Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah.
But I want to see, like when I think of a remake of it, is I would like to see it about Derry and not really about the kids at all. And that Derry was like, you see racism. There's the whole, the Black Spot, which is a club, a dance club that all of the people of color would flock to for like to feel safe. Yeah. And they ended up getting locked in there, and then it burnt down with people in it. There are like explosions. There's multiple ways in which kids are just dying from awful things, like falling into things. There's the bullies in that story are way worse. Like like in the films and the miniseries, when we see like the bullies, they're like kind of bad, right? But then we kind of believe like Pennywise took over them and then made them worse. But in the book, it's like they're already very, very, like one murdered his brother, and then the other murdered Mike's dog, and his like father has been like abusing that family because they're the only black family. Yeah. And he was already so evil that it's more of like Pennywise was like, oh, you're already bad. I'm just kind of like helping you along, as opposed to like, I'm making you this. Like I'm taking advantage of you, right? Which is like what you get in those ways. But there's like, what I think is really the biggest part and difference between like the books and the movie is that like the movies are like, here's some kids fighting their fears, right? Yeah. And what we found in our first episode in diving into It Chapter 1 was that this isn't like, media isn't what it seems all the time, right? Like what we're really seeing is kids who are struggling with trauma. Like one kid's brother disappears and is missing, and another is, suffering from Munchausen by proxy. Another, has confidence issues and deals with stress and trauma with humor, right? I think in this, there's a spoiler in that they make Bill Hader's character gay in it. And my hypothesis in making him very, like him being the character everyone loves, be the gay one, is because they wanted to kind of like have a good foil to the fact that they started their film
with such a very,
with gay violence.
Yeah.
Like, like violence against these,
violence.
Already, harmed community, right? And so they thought like, okay, but if we do this, because in the books it's like there's hints that Eddie might have feelings for Richie, and Richie does feel emotional about because Eddie does die. Spoilers again in the movie and in the book. In this, they made it very much like Richie had always loved him, which is fine. But I did think it was a very specific kind of route to go. Essentially, like, so not having the black spot and having that racism and the inherent evil of this town incorporated in the first film.
Yeah.
And then choosing to have this one spot of violence of the town be that is where I feel like is the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because
I agree,
that's never
because they didn't set it up appropriately. Where like in the book it is set up
Yes.
because all that awfulness is always happening, and Derry is just a kind of a bad place to be.
Yes.
And you don't want to live there. It's bad.
Yes.
But yeah, in the films it was not.
It wasn't about the town in the film. So to
about the
choose
kids.
that, it does seem disconnected for anyone who does not know the films or the book, right? So like you're watching that, you're like, why all like what does this have to do with kids being murdered, right? Like it makes no sense.
Or like if you were reading the book, it's
Yes.
just that is something that is actively
It's just
happening.
another awful thing you're reading. I didn't feel like it really should have been there. Because when I saw it, I was like, oh, are we going to show all the bad stuff that happened then? And it didn't. It was very glossed over that the town was evil, essentially. Or that people are evil, right? And then the other thing that was not portrayed effectively on screen and never really is the character of Stanley. So I'm going to go on just a brief tangent.
Go ahead.
So only because I feel very,
Live your
very
life.
strongly about him. So in the book, Stanley is incredibly charming. He's like witty and fun. He's like, I just envisioned, like, I was like, I would have had the biggest crush on this kid when I was a kid, like the way that he was written. He makes jokes at his own like expense for being Jewish, and he's not at all the way that he's portrayed as this like scrawny, scared kid who's like, of course that one is the one who commits suicide, right? Like, when you, and in both films, they had to portray him as this weak person because it makes us believe easier that he would do that. Whereas
Which is also just a larger issue of misperception of what suicide actually
yes.
is and what it means.
But when it comes to Stephen King's novel, Stanley is not that at all. Stanley's a very strong character, and he is multifaceted, right? And what I thought was very interesting in his perception of Pennywise versus everyone else's is that the problem that he had with it was that the existence of it and Pennywise and this other creature, this being from forever, has completely like penetrated his belief in how the world works. Yeah. Like his entire understanding of existence and like what is real is completely warped. Like he has his religion and it cannot exist parallel to something like it.
Yeah.
And so it completely breaks him mentally. And he is fighting back at trying to like not accept its existence because it is breaking him. Yeah. And so like he does become this opposition for a lot of it because he's like, I cannot. Like he is really having like a breakdown because it just totally derails him. Whereas the kids are like, okay, there's this crazy thing, we have to fight it. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, what is this? Are you looking at what that is? It's not just a clown. It's not just a monster. It's not just a big spider in the sewers. It is like ungodly, and it is here. And it is controlling
why
the
are
world.
We with it? That.
Yes. And he fights so hard. So like him pretending it's not there and like fighting back and not wanting to be a part of it is so much more than just like him being afraid of it. It literally is tearing him apart from the inside. And I think you cannot show that on screen. You can't show this like break in your like understanding of reality through a character, especially a kid.
Because you can't say everything that's happening like you can in a book. Yes. And that's kind of like the unique way that horror, through the written word, that it's just very much a different avenue, and it just allows for a lot more subtlety and create. And like you have to build tension in different ways, and it's different. Yeah. But it doesn't translate to film.
Like if they're going to neglect the actual message of the film, that's fine, or the book, that's fine, right? Because it's still a good time. It was still a good movie. It was still fun. And it's okay. That's why I think like Stand By Me does so well, because there's narration in the beginning and end, right? So we get a little bit of the internal like narration of a character without having to like try to show that through someone's face, right? Like, so we have to make Stanley scared. But we also wanted to talk about something else.
Yeah, so we also watched Pet Semetary, the new one. We've seen the old one, but right now we watch the new one. Directed by Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmeyer. Dr. Lewis Creed and his wife Rachel relocated from Boston to rural Maine with their 2 young children. Who knew it would be Maine? It's always Maine. The couple soon discover a mysterious burial ground hidden deep in the woods near their home.
this movie from 2019. So I grew up with the original one.
Same.
And it was the one that I would like challenge myself constantly to watch, even though I was afraid of it because I was really young.
Yeah.
But it would be like this thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to watch The Labyrinth. Then I'm going to run and check on my sister and make sure that the toddler, was still there and I didn't accidentally wish her away to the Goblin King. And then I would put on Pet Semetary and be really scared and not sleep for several
Why do
weeks.
you watch these things by yourself?
This film from 2019, I'll just go first and say that I thought it was very bad.
Yeah.
Very bad.
It was
There's nothing I liked about this film.
I liked the little girl. She was a good actress.
Yeah, but even still, they didn't really give her anything to be good at. Like, she wasn't written well. And it was, like, nothing mattered. Like, I didn't buy into any of the motives. I didn't, like, Judd was barely there. Like, things were just
still
happening.
Sad when, spoilers, he died.
Yes. But it was, like, only because he's an old man and that's how you feel. Like, I was like,
true.
who is
That's
this guy?
definitely true. That was just because, like, I got feelings about old people dying.
Exactly. But I feel like I didn't really believe, I was like, I don't care about this family. Like, things are just happening to them, but I haven't spent enough time with them to feel like anything.
It was fine. It was there. It was okay. It wasn't great. I remember seeing the original. The original was different. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
He had the little boy and he was just like, Daddy.
And he's
creepy
it was
stuff.
like scary because you don't want your kids to try to murder you.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the little girl, she does a good job of being scary murder times. She was a good actress for a kid.
Yeah,
like,
but it was, again, written really bad. I was like, okay, she's being a little weird. None of it, I never felt afraid. I never felt worried.
That's fair. I at no point in the
like,
entire film felt any level of fear. And I mean,
if this had been done properly.
no, I did feel upset when the little boy ran towards the truck.
Yes, so in the book,
I knew what happened.
In the book and in the first movie, Gage gets murdered. I'm going to say murdered because that truck driver was driving way too fast. And he hits him, and then, like, that's the whole point. Like, they put him in the special cemetery, and he comes back, and he's evil. In this, they wanted to do this, like, twist.
Because everyone thought Gage was going to die.
Yeah, they definitely set it up for that, but then it turned out that it was Ellie who died. And their excuse for that was that you can't really get kids who are as young as Gage is supposed to be to say the things that Gage in the film or in the book says, which is very true. Because Gage in the book says some things. I just think they lost like a lot of the fun that was there. So
they tried to make it more of a drama. Mm-hmm. Like, it was very much about, like, how do we communicate death to our children? Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I definitely felt like the themes of Stephen's existence through that. But does that happen in the book as well?
No, so
where they discuss, like, should they tell the children that the things have died?
And more so. So what I found from the themes of the book. So I listened to the book. I listened to it on audiobook. The book, there are these themes of, like, what do we tell our kids? And there's this line that keeps coming up where our main character, the dad, it essentially talks about how he remembered a time when his mom lied to him about where babies come from. Yes. And he never forgave her after that. Like, it to a degree, like, moms lie. So he had this.
I relate to that so hard.
Right? Like, when kids find out that.
My mom tell me about Santa.
Yeah, you feel deceived and, like, used and, like, you can't trust them. And so he has this adamant thing where he's like, you have to tell them the truth. Where his wife, who has suffered from trauma because her sister Zelda had been sick and she had this which is a whole other conversation. But so she's very sensitive to certain topics and believes that kids should be kept as kids and that we should shelter them and protect them from the harsh realities of the world. Right. So we have two we have two opposing kind of feelings that happen where he's like, we need to tell her that the cat might die. And she's like, we can't tell her that. Just tell her that the cat ran away, right? And so there's this like, and that's because she has her own problems with death, right? So things that I found with this was that there's like the prologue or whatever, which is Stephen King wrote about, like, writing the book and his experiences, and it's essentially that, like, he lived in this little town in Maine with his wife and his older daughter and younger son, and there was a pet cemetery. And he tells a story about his daughter who, her cat died and they had to bury it over there. And they signed it like was obedient, right? And she says she has this temper tantrum essentially where she's like, tell God to get his own cat. This is my cat. God can have his own cat, right? Like she's just so mad that God took her cat away, which is incorporated. That happens in there. Because it's a great line, right? Yeah. The way that his wife is portrayed is like, this guy just doesn't get his wife and he never cares to get her. And he's just a bad dude. Like, not bad. Like, he's just bad at being like a good dude, essentially. Like, he's just there.
Well, he maybe just doesn't know how to be a supportive husband.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's very accustomed to being supported, but not supporting back.
Yeah, and she definitely supports him and goes through this, and he's never really honest with her. And I feel like he's always in a fight, and when she gets mad, he's just waiting for her to stop being mad instead of being like, let's talk about it. And so, like, to me, I was like, oh,
which
here
is
goes
the opposite of what you're suggesting to do with the kids. So, like,
exactly. When I was reading this, I was just like, oh, here goes again, writing bad women, right? But then I was like, I mean, like, this is what he does. He wrote, all the characters are bad to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just what they are. And so I was like, all right, it's fine. But what I discovered, my own personal things, and then I'll let you, Kat, go into your personal things, in just reading the book, and I'll let you see a little bit in movies, is in the book, he has this, like, when he's trying to convince himself to essentially resurrect Gage, he understands that there's this possibility that Gage will come back, like, not all the way there, right? Yeah. And he uses the R word because it's the old times.
Yep.
And he uses a lot, and it hurt. But it was just like, okay, well, if he does come out that way, that's fine. I'll still love him, right?
Yeah.
And when he finally said it, I was like, okay, good, he's saying it. Because to me, the existence of the Pet Semetary and the capacity of, like, bringing things back to life and sometimes dead is better mentality really rubbed me the wrong way. Because what that seemed to me, in the way that I see Rachel and her experiences with Zelda and this, like, having the trauma of, like, taking care of a person, was this kind of like what we discussed in our disability episode, where it was like, oh, because they're different or they're disabled, then they don't deserve to live because they're a burden on their family. And that's what I felt like was being said.
When that word was being thrown around, and that was being...
Even before the word was being said.
Really?
Just
okay.
The concept of, like, when they were saying, like, sometimes dead is better, and this idea of, like, if something hit, like, because there's this idea, like, if he got hit by a car but he was still alive but different, like, would we keep him around or would we pull the plug, kind of thing?
Oh,
which hit very personally, because I've had an incredibly similar experience where that exactly happened, where a plug was pulled and now a person is different, but we still love that person. And so I felt, like, incredibly triggered. And then it went on to get to the point where he was blatantly calling it what it was, where there would be someone who is different, and how he was saying, like, well, then it's still worth it. But it didn't jive completely well, or, like, mesh well with this idea of the way that Rachel portrayed Zelda. And the thing is, like, he did a good job of being like, it's not your fault that she died, and it's not your fault that you felt that way, because that's how people feel, right?
And she was a kid at the time, too. So it's a different way to process that kind of thing that's happening than an adult person could maybe process it. I feel like there's maybe a lot less resentment, or hopefully so, as an adult person that is, like, a child who doesn't understand.
And I mean, even the parents,
even in
are
it,
like
you
that.
see that, where, like, Georgie, he dies and Will blames himself for it because he didn't want to hang out with him that one time. And it's like, when you're a kid, you suck, man. Like, you suck. Like, it's unfortunate.
And
it's just the reality
like,
of being and it's not your job. Like, and you just can't help that. So like, you feel how you feel, and maybe that's not a good way to feel. Yeah. But you can't just blame yourself your whole life. For the fact you didn't want to hang out with your little brother for a minute.
Yeah.
Like,
but she also has, like, survivor's guilt, right? Yeah. Like, the fact that she was okay and good, so she felt like Zelda hated her because her back wasn't twisted.
Yeah.
And so it's really about grief and trauma and dealing with loss and dealing with, you know, people no longer being what you had had them as. Like, they're different, right? I think if this film had been done properly, it would have been another Babadook.
Yeah.
It could have, because that's what this book is. This book is a Babadook. It's very long. I would say it's not my favorite Stephen King ever. But I get it, and there is trauma there, and it's probably mostly because I was very triggered. But I think there was a lot that was being said there that doesn't come through in the movies at all, because the movie was just like, things happen. Look at spooky stuff, right? It was just about like scare, scare, scare. Ooh, what if, right? Whereas Stephen King isn't that. And so his films are never really going to be that unless they get a chance to be a full emotional roller coaster.
And I would argue that like Stephen is writing about his life a lot of the time, even if it's subconscious. He doesn't have those memories anymore, because a lot of times when you've experienced great levels of trauma, you don't retain the details, you know, and that's stuff that comes out creatively, and like people react like, oh, that was so profound. It was like, that was my youth. That is just how I processed my trauma. And it's always like, when you have people viewing it without that context, I feel like it's very easy to misinterpret, or just like not really fully grasp the depth, or like even like all the things being said subconsciously.
Yeah, feelings. Yeah, I said feelings. Let's talk about feelings. Okay. And all that spooky stuff. I love spooky stuff.
All right. So if we like it, it's God Can Get His Own Cat, which I feel very wholeheartedly.
God Can Get His Own Cat. I feel very strongly about that.
And if we don't like it, it was good enough for Georgie.
Wow. All right, Pennywise.
Yeah, when
we get it, you're eating some kids, but that's, ooh. Yeah. Everyone else had that reaction. Yeah. I feel like we're just like, wow, okay. That was a little too far. You're murdering people, but that was the line.
Uncalled for.
Uncalled for, that was the line.
All right, so for Stephen King himself, writer extraordinaire.
God can get his own cat.
God can get his own cat. That's my cat.
That's my cat.
Yes.
She is fat and beautiful, and you will not have her.
And you know downright that I would go and put her in a Pet Semetary, even if it is a demon that ends up in her instead.
I would love that demon. It will wear pumpkin bandanas.
I really feel like we don't get the idea that, like, it's not them coming back evil. It's just that something else is in there. Like,
I think it's just that something else is in there.
No, that's what it is, but I feel like you don't really see that in the film.
Yeah, no,
it's just kind of like, oh, she's weird now, but in the book, it's like
still my baby.
Something's walking around, and it comes back like a few times. Like, it's crazy.
And the big thing is like, I want to take more of these baby bodies and fill them with whatever this evil thing is.
2 thumbs up, Stephen. We have come full circle. We still don't approve of children orgies.
Yeah,
it does nothing for the plot. It was bad. And
that is not how you deal with that specific kind of
Bev
trauma.
Deserves better.
Yes.
In that. And she also deserved better than Jessica Chastain in the new movie. What about for It Chapter 2?
Wow. Oh, Pennywise. I can't believe you said that. It was good enough for Georgie. That's real rude. I liked Bill Hader.
It would have been made better. And what I was expecting is at the end is if Richie had told the gang that he was gay. Like, I feel like because he just kind of, like, he didn't have any growth then. He didn't learn anything. Like, he just wrote it and he just carved it a little harder into the bridge, but he didn't do anything. Like, if he had been confident enough after that trauma to be like, hey guys, like, when he got serious with them afterwards and said, I'm gay, and then they all would have been like, yeah, and then still loved him, that would have been a really good, like, foil to the violence that we saw at the beginning. And they missed that. Well, what about Pet Semetary?
The book or the movie? I didn't read the book, but you've spoken very highly of it.
Even still, the book was not my favorite Stephen King book.
The new movie was, The old movie was fun.
Yes.
But the new movie was
Yeah. But I haven't seen that in a long time. Yeah, but yeah. I just think the book, the movie never stood a chance because it can't be what the book is. And not just like any of his stuff. But
his books are just like doing stuff, you know.
Yeah, but this episode has influenced me to actually read some Stephen King more than I have. I read Pet
They're just so
Sematary.
long. I can't read short things. It's hard.
This one's not that long. Well, yeah, I feel like I get Stephen King now.
Yeah, I'm picking up my spoon down.
It's kind of like when we did M. Night, and I was like, oh, I get M. Night. I get him.
Yeah.
I kind of, same way, I got Mary Shelley.
Yeah, I'm just happy we gave more attention to it, you know?
Yeah.
That we kind of uneducatedly did not like him in the start of our podcast, and now through...
It was more we didn't like
long journey.
movies that were made for him.
And the movies aren't doing them justice, so that makes sense. Yeah, it was just like, we weren't as analysis-y. It's not a word, but like as we once have become.
Yeah. All right.
You know what
I think
saying.
It's time for someone to go to bed. Well, I like Stephen King, so don't get married.
Don't get married, they'll eat your kids. So
Pennywise will eat your kids.
And he'll say real just
and then
out
you put them in the ground
stuff.
in a special place, and then they come back. But it's not them. Because dead is better, I guess.
And he's going to say some real out-of-pocket stuff
He's gonna
about your dead brother. And it's going to be like, wow.
It's very out of pocket.
I'm just like, why? Yo, murder was
like,
bad, but that was too far.
Oof. Go to bed, Pennywise.